Your pancreas is working right now. Not visibly, not in a way you can feel under normal circumstances, but continuously secreting enzymes and hormones that determine whether the food you just ate gets digested properly and whether your blood sugar stays within a range compatible with life. That work is happening in an organ the size of your hand, tucked deep behind your stomach, producing insulin to lower blood glucose, glucagon to raise it when it drops too low, and digestive enzymes that break down proteins, fats, and carbohydrates into molecules your intestines can absorb. Pancreatic function is not just about preventing diabetes. It is about maintaining the metabolic stability that allows every other organ system to function properly. And when it declines, the consequences extend far beyond blood sugar control. Pancreatic dysfunction is one of the most underdiagnosed conditions in metabolic medicine. It does not announce itself with acute pain until the damage is already severe. Usually revealing itself through vague digestive complaints, unexplained weight changes, or blood sugar abnormalities that develop so gradually, they are mistaken for normal aging or poor dietary choices. The problem is that for decades we have been told that pancreatic problems are either acute pancreatitis from alcohol and gallstones, or type 1 diabetes from autoimmune destruction of beta cells. Take care of those specific risks and your pancreas will be fine. Except that completely misses the progressive dysfunction that develops in millions of adults who never have acute pancreatitis and never develop overt diabetes. What we now understand from metabolic research and imaging studies is that chronic low-grade pancreatic inflammation, beta cell exhaustion from years of insulin resistance, and exocrine insufficiency from aging and metabolic stress all create progressive dysfunction that begins decades before standard diagnostic criteria are met. And most people have been living with declining pancreatic function for 10 to 20 years, without recognizing that their fatigue, digestive problems, blood sugar instability, and nutrient deficiencies are coming from an organ they rarely think about. Hi, I am Dr. Alex. I am an emergency medicine doctor, and after nearly 10 years in emergency departments, I have seen what happens when pancreatic dysfunction that could have been detected early is not identified until it progresses to acute pancreatitis, diabetic ketoacidosis, or pancreatic insufficiency, severe enough to cause malnutrition. And my goal now is to help people recognize the early warning signs of pancreatic stress before irreversible damage occurs, and to understand what actually protects pancreatic function over the long term. For the next several minutes, I want to walk you through the 9 silent signs that your pancreas is struggling, why conventional medical screening misses early pancreatic dysfunction, and what you can actually do to support pancreatic health based on the mechanisms we understand today. Okay, so if you are watching this video, you are probably concerned about your metabolic health and digestive function. And I just want to take a moment here to make you a promise. I promise to keep creating the most helpful, evidence-based videos I possibly can, grounded in clinical research and the latest medical science to help you live longer and prevent the diseases I see filling emergency departments every single day. And all I ask in return is that you give this fairly new channel a chance and hit the subscribe button. If you get to the end of this video and you did not think it was worth your time, or you have not learned something genuinely useful about protecting your pancreas, then feel free to unsubscribe, no hard feelings at all. But if you give me your time and attention, I will give you everything I have learned from over a decade in medicine and hundreds of hours reading endocrinology and gastroenterology research. So please help me out, hit the subscribe button to help this channel reach more people like you, and let us continue with the video. What the pancreas actually does to understand the warning signs of pancreatic dysfunction. We first need to understand what the pancreas does and why it is so critical to metabolic health. The pancreas has 2 distinct functional systems. The endocrine pancreas consists of islets of Langerhans containing beta cells that produce insulin, alpha cells that produce glucagon, and other hormone-producing cells. The exocrine pancreas produces digestive enzymes, including amylase for starches, lipase for fats, and proteases for proteins. When beta cells function properly, blood glucose remains stable within a narrow range. When exocrine function is adequate, you can fully digest food and absorb nutrients. Progressive dysfunction in either system creates cascading metabolic problems that accelerate aging and disease development. The 9 warning signs. Sign 1 is persistent hunger shortly after eating, particularly for carbohydrates and sweets. This suggests insulin resistance where glucose cannot enter cells efficiently despite elevated insulin, creating reactive hunger when insulin eventually overshoots and blood sugar drops. Sign 2 is unexplained weight loss despite normal food intake, indicating inadequate enzyme production preventing calorie extraction from food, or insufficient insulin preventing nutrient storage. Sign 3 is chronic fatigue from blood sugar instability, energy crashes, and malabsorption preventing efficient cellular energy generation. Sign 4 is frequent abdominal bloating and gas after meals, particularly those containing fat or protein, from bacterial fermentation of undigested substrates reaching the colon. Sign 5 is changes in stool consistency, specifically pale, greasy, bulky stools that float, indicating steatorrhea from fat malabsorption. Sign 6 is unexplained vitamin deficiencies, particularly fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K that require proper fat digestion for absorption. Sign 7 is frequent episodes of upper abdominal discomfort or mild pain, particularly after large or fatty meals, suggesting subclinical pancreatic inflammation. Sign 8 is skin changes, including darkening patches on the neck or underarms, indicating insulin resistance, or easy bruising from vitamin K malabsorption affecting clotting. Sign 9 is recurrent episodes of nausea after eating, from inadequate enzyme production creating abnormal digestive signals and delayed gastric emptying. Why standard screening misses these signs? Conventional medical checkups measure fasting glucose and sometimes hemoglobin A1C, but these only become abnormal after years of beta cell decline. They do not measure fasting insulin, which would reveal insulin resistance a decade before glucose becomes abnormal. They do not assess pancreatic enzyme levels. They do not evaluate for exocrine insufficiency. Standard screening waits for diabetes diagnosis rather than detecting progressive beta cell exhaustion. It misses exocrine dysfunction entirely unless symptoms are severe enough to prompt specific testing like fecal elastase or secretin stimulation tests. What drives pancreatic dysfunction? The first driver is chronic metabolic stress from insulin resistance. When cells resist insulin, beta cells work harder producing more insulin to maintain glucose control. This creates oxidative stress, endoplasmic reticulum stress, and eventually beta cell apoptosis. The second driver is chronic low-grade inflammation from visceral adiposity, poor diet, and metabolic dysfunction. Inflammatory cytokines damage both endocrine and exocrine pancreatic tissue. The third driver is lipotoxicity, where excess fatty acids accumulate in pancreatic cells, impairing function and promoting cell death. The fourth driver is oxidative stress from poor antioxidant status, high blood sugar, and inflammatory burden overwhelming pancreatic defenses. And here is what you need to understand. This is not your fault. So you did not choose to develop insulin resistance and pancreatic dysfunction because you enjoy metabolic disease. The food environment prioritizes convenience over metabolic health. Public health messaging promoted high carbohydrate intake that drives insulin resistance. Medical screening waits for disease rather than detecting early dysfunction when intervention is most effective. The system created the conditions for widespread pancreatic stress and then failed to identify it early. The failure is systemic, not personal. How to actually protect pancreatic function? The first intervention is reducing beta cell workload through improved insulin sensitivity. This means prioritizing whole foods with minimal blood sugar impact, reducing refined carbohydrates and added sugars that spike glucose and insulin, and achieving body composition with minimal visceral fat through sustainable caloric deficit and resistance training. Research shows that even modest weight loss preferentially reduces visceral fat and dramatically improves insulin sensitivity, reducing the constant stress on beta cells. The second intervention is supporting exocrine function through adequate protein and micronutrient intake. The pancreas requires specific amino acids to produce enzymes and bicarbonate-rich fluid. Zinc, selenium, and B vitamins are critical cofactors. Some people with documented exocrine insufficiency benefits from supplemental pancreatic enzymes taken with meals to reduce pancreatic workload while function recovers. The third intervention is reducing oxidative stress through antioxidant-rich foods and potentially targeted supplementation. Cruciferous vegetables, berries, green tea, and foods rich in vitamins C and E support pancreatic antioxidant defenses. Some research supports N-acetylcysteine and alpha-lipoic acid for reducing oxidative stress in metabolic dysfunction. The fourth intervention is minimizing inflammatory burden through anti-inflammatory dietary patterns like Mediterranean diet, emphasizing vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts, olive oil, and fatty fish, while limiting processed foods, refined sugars, and excessive omega-6 fatty acids. Chronic inflammation is toxic to pancreatic tissue and accelerates both endocrine and exocrine dysfunction. Now, I need to add an important medical caveat. If you have diagnosed diabetes, pancreatitis, or concerning symptoms like severe abdominal pain, unexplained significant weight loss, or jaundice, you need to work with an endocrinologist or gastroenterologist. Some conditions require medication, enzyme replacement, or other medical interventions. What I am describing is preventive strategy and early intervention for subclinical dysfunction, not replacement for medical care when disease is established. What I see in emergency medicine. In the emergency department, we see pancreatic disease in its most severe forms. Acute pancreatitis causing excruciating pain, vomiting, and systemic inflammation that can progress to multi-organ failure. Diabetic ketoacidosis, where insulin deficiency causes life-threatening metabolic acidosis. Pancreatic cancer presenting with painless jaundice when tumors are already advanced. What becomes clear is that these acute presentations have long silent histories. The patient with acute pancreatitis often had years of subclinical inflammation. The person in DKA had progressive beta cell loss for years before complete insulin deficiency. The cancer patient likely had chronic inflammation, creating conditions for malignancy. People who recognize and address early pancreatic dysfunction have fundamentally different outcomes. Those who improve insulin sensitivity in their 40s, reduce metabolic stress, support pancreatic function through nutrition and lifestyle, arrive at 70 with functional pancreatic reserve and stable metabolism. Those who ignore early warning signs while insulin resistance and inflammation progress arrive at 70 with diabetes, enzyme insufficiency, and significantly compromised metabolic health requiring extensive medication and dietary restriction. The bigger picture is that pancreatic health determines metabolic stability, energy availability, nutrient absorption, and ultimately biological aging. When your pancreas functions optimally, you maintain stable blood sugar, digest food efficiently, absorb nutrients properly, and avoid the metabolic dysfunction that drives premature aging. When pancreatic function declines, every system suffers. The fatigue, digestive problems, weight changes, and metabolic instability people attribute to aging often originate from progressive pancreatic dysfunction that could be detected and addressed. So here is what I want you to take away. Pancreatic health is not just about preventing diabetes. It is about maintaining the metabolic foundation that supports healthy aging. The 9 warning signs we discussed are your body communicating that pancreatic function is declining before irreversible damage occurs. Recognizing these signs creates opportunity for intervention through improved insulin sensitivity, reduced inflammatory burden, adequate nutritional support, and lifestyle modifications that reduce pancreatic stress. These interventions are not extreme or unsustainable. They are evidence-based approaches that address the biological mechanisms driving pancreatic dysfunction. The return on investment is measured in decades of preserved metabolic function, sustained energy, proper nutrient absorption, and independence that extends well into later years. And finally, please subscribe to the channel if you found this video useful. It helps me reach more people trying to understand their health and prevent the diseases that fill emergency departments. Thank you for watching.